Greetings, class, from one of the world's newest states on planet Earth, Montenegro. Now, it's not the newest of the newest sovereign states on planet Earth. The absolute newest that I know of is South Sudan, which just became a state a few years ago. But Montenegro is right in the running for at least the top three newest of new states because it became an independent, fully recognized sovereign state just in 2006. And the way that it happened actually flies in the face of what I've already taught you, which is sovereign states never, ever, ever, never, ever, never willingly give up part of their own territory for a new state to form. But in this case, this is the exception to the rule. There's always exceptions to the rule, and Montenegro is an exception in all ways, shapes, and forms because this is 100% an awesome, beautiful country. We're here in the, I don't even know if it's a city or a town or a village of Kotor, yes, on Kotor Bay, you see behind us. So I'll say a few things geologically and geographically about this place, and then I'll talk about how this place politically became a state so recently and so peacefully. So first, I'm going to have Katie do a panoramic view of Kotor Bay here in Montenegro. Just flip it around any way you want. You got to get a view of this. It's so absolutely spectacular because part of the reason that it's spectacular. You can do it. Do it. 360, 360. You got it. You got it. You got it. I mean, look at it. Look at these mountains. This is absolutely fantastic. So one of the reasons that this country and many countries here on the Adriatic Sea are so spectacular is because here in the Balkan Peninsula, this triangle-shaped wedge that juts down into the Mediterranean, it's all roughly topographically and terrain-wise kind of like this. It's not super high mountains. These are mountains all around us that you've now seen that are about 2,000 to 3,000 feet. For those of you in Blacksburg, Virginia, that's about the average height of the Appalachians. So where you're at, Blacksburg is about 2,000, 2,100 feet above sea level. All of these mountains are about 2,000 to 3,000 feet on average, but they're spectacular because they just go straight from 2,000 to 3,000 feet right into the water. And this is typical of Montenegro, which has a little bit of coastline. It's very typical of the Dalmatian coast, which is north of us in Croatia. This huge long strip of dotted islands and mountains that jump straight down to the ocean. It's typical for Greece. It's typical of all the Balkan Peninsula countries. Now, geologically, for my geologic friends back home, and I want to shout out to all my College of Natural Resource friends, but also my awesome friend in the Department of Geography, Lynn Ressler, who knows about mountains. She teaches a mountain geography course. She's going to tell us more about what's so unique about this particular area that we're in Montenegro is that this is all karst topography. That's karst with a K-A-R-S-T. It's a limestone formation. It's a sedimentary rock that over millions of years gets formulated and rises up. So there's like caves and crazy stuff, and this whole mountainous area is just like super awesome. And if we were just to go inland a few, I don't know, maybe a dozen miles, we'd be in the Dinaric Alps. So all the Balkan Peninsula is this mountainous area right down to the coast, but the whole interior is really mountainous too. The Dinaric Alps are like super awesome. So that's the physical, the geologic, the kind of terrain stuff that I know about this part of the planet. And just, honestly, just look. It's so gorgeous. It's this terrain, and then it's Mediterranean climate, which means you have this scrubland, these beautiful pines and cedars right down on the water, this fishing village after small town after village, which probably looks not terribly different than it did 500 or 1,000 years ago. And it's an absolutely wonderful part of planet Earth to go visit. And now back to the political. It's some of the newest countries on planet Earth to visit right here in the Balkan Peninsula, because Montenegro is the last sovereign state to depart from what was the country we now call the former Yugoslavia. And Yugoslavia consisted of, let's see, what's now 6 different sovereign states. It was one single super state back in the day. And the way that Montenegro departed out of this super state is quite interesting because a lot of folks don't understand what Yugoslavia was all about, because Yugoslavia and this whole area is really super unique in 20th century history in that it was communist, right? So they were on the other side of the Iron Curtain. They were the other side, the adversaries during the Cold War. And most Americans think that, oh, well, they were communist/socialist Yugoslavia, so they must have been best buddies with the Soviet Union. So they must be all the communist people we don't like, and they don't like us. Check yourself. Check yourself and check your history, because Yugoslavia is a 100% unique story in that they were communist. Yes, they actually 1,000 years ago, Yugoslavia, but specifically Montenegro, for most of the last 1,000 years was its own independent little kingdom. That's what's so unique about how this place became independent. On again, off again for 1,000 or 1,100 years, Montenegro was its own separate kingdom slash fiefdom that had negotiations and relationships with bigger powers all around it, that it was always kind of semi-independent. And it didn't get fully overrun, depending on if there was a big empire or kingdom around it, it might get overrun, but it always had a relationship that we're kind of Montenegrins, we're kind of a little separate, we're kind of a little bit different, we kind of have a little bit of autonomy. Again, this is for 1,000 years. And then it wasn't until the Ottoman Empire overtook most of the Balkan Peninsula that this place got overrun by the Ottoman Empire, but even then they fought back, and these folks, because of the terrain, talking about the terrain, they were independent warrior city-states, much like Kotor still looks in this day. Terrain can work to your factor, that you're independent, that these are tough places to get into. They're easier places to defend. I'm actually podcasting from what looks to be a fortress that looks to be built to be 100% defendable. You saw all the mountain chain around us. We're on this little knoll out here, and all these little places you can see that we were talking about. You could shoot arrows out. This is a supremely defendable little fortress here on the coast of Kotor Bay. And so even when the Ottomans overtook this area that we now call Montenegro about 500 years ago, they still maintained a sense of autonomy. They had a relationship with the Ottoman Empire where the Ottomans were like, well, you hill people are super tough and super resistant, so we're going to negotiate with you instead of just trying to beat you down and take you over. When the Ottoman Empire finally came and went, World War I, they kind of dissipated and went away. This area kind of gained autonomy again for a little bit. And then it was turned into, and this is back to our story of Yugoslavia, this whole area became the Kingdom of Serbia. Because even after the Ottoman Empire went, this territory that we now call Yugoslavia was absorbed by the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And those guys also lost in World War I. So all of these areas have gone back and forth between ownership, but Montenegro has always kind of kept this autonomous nature, as I keep suggesting. So through the Ottomans, they were semi-autonomous. Through the Austrian-Hungarians, they were semi-autonomous. And then when the Austro-Hungarians went away after World War I, this place kind of became independent, but then it was kind of absorbed by this thing we call the Kingdom of Serbia, which only lasted about 5 or 6 years. And then it became the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. So this area that we're in right now got absorbed by the Serbs, an ethnic group over that way, the Kingdom of Serbia. Then it became a greater Kingdom of Yugoslavia, where the Serbs entered into a negotiation with the Croats and Slovenes to form a bigger area that we now say, oh, that was the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. That then the Nazis overran during World War II, and they fought back, and this one dude named Marshal Tito, who became the leader of Yugoslavia, led the partisans to fight for freedom, to push out the Nazis, and they were rewarded at the end of World War II with this autonomous area that then became known as the sovereign state of Yugoslavia. But it wasn't just that it was this dude named Marshal Tito, who was a dictator, who took over this whole area, Montenegro included. These were all areas, Montenegro, Serbia, Slovenia, Croatia. They were all little like independent communist semi-states, and they bonded together in a kind of a greater little Yugoslavian socialist union. So much the way that you look at the former USSR is the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Yugoslavia was its own union of Soviet/socialist republics, including all these areas, Montenegro included, that became known as Yugoslavia all the way into the modern era. Now, to wrap up this summary politically very quickly, the guy named Marshal Joseph Tito was the benevolent dictator who oversaw all this, helped unify the area during World War II, fight off the Nazis, was a friend of both East and West. And while this state, Montenegro, became part of a socialist experiment called Yugoslavia, they always kind of remained distant from the Soviet Union, which saw itself as the big brother to everything in Eastern Europe. So much so that Tito said at one point, and I believe it was early on in the 60s, he said, yeah, we're separate. No, we're not part of the greater Soviet Union. We're socialist/communist, but we're our own state, and we're distancing ourselves from the Soviet Union and all those guys. So these guys had their own little experiment going on here. And now to summarize and finish the story here from beautiful Montenegro, how did these guys become their own sovereign state quite peacefully? This was a unified group of semi-autonomous communist collectives called Yugoslavia. And Tito was the person who held it all together. Once he died in 1980, there was no singular kind of unifying great awesome person that could continue to hold it together. So you had Slovenes, which is a different ethnicity from the Croats, which is different from the Bosnian, which is different from the Serbs, which is different from the Montenegrins. And once Tito departed after decades of rule, there was no one who could kind of forcibly hold it together. So lots of different groups said, hey, we're Croats and we want to be separate. We want to be our own country called Croatia. And the Slovenes are the ones that started. They said, we declare independence, we're out. Montenegro held its cards. So just to give you a quick timeline here, Marshal Tito died in 1980. This whole area called Yugoslavia kind of puttered along. It was a socialist experiment that did okay, but not great. And it puttered along for another 8 or 9 years after Tito's death, till about 88, 89. And then ethnic tensions became so high that people started infighting with each other, saying, we want to be separate. We want to be part of this thing called Yugoslavia. We want our own state. But it didn't really get hot totally until the Soviet Union itself collapsed in 1990-91. And once that went away, all these states, including Montenegro, started to say, hey, we think we want to be our own sovereign state. We don't want to be part of the Soviet Union. We don't want to be part of this unified Yugoslavia experiment anymore either. And the gates really got opened in 1991 when the Slovenes declared independence. Then Croatia did it. Then Bosnia-Herzegovina did it. And this whole time there was lots of infightings, lots of terrible, hundreds of thousands of deaths, even genocide. But Montenegro, during that whole period of the turbulent 90s in Yugoslavia, kind of held its cards. It said, yeah, there's a lot of crap going down right now, but we vote, and they did vote, and said, we're going to stay a part of what's now Serbia. The Republic Sovereign State of Serbia, we're going to remain a part of that. So Montenegro remained a part of that. So did this place called Kosovo. So did another autonomous territory called Bodacious up in northern Serbia. So all of them elected to stay part of Serbia for a bit longer. But then as things got really nasty in the 90s and all these bad things were happening across this entire peninsula, this Montenegrins started to distance themselves. And they said, hey, look, we've always been an independent kingdom. We're a separate ethnicity. Have a different historical story. And so we think we don't want to be part of all the bad things that are happening in Serbia right now. And even though they initially elected to stay part of Serbia, by the early 2000s, 2004, 2005, a lot of Montenegrins said, hey, we kind of think we want to become independent. We want to distance ourselves from Serbia. Serbia had been attacked by the international community at this point, had been invaded by NATO and the United States, who had bombed them for things that were going on in both Bosnia, but also this territory called Kosovo, which a lot of the outside world felt that there were genocides and nasty things happening, crimes against humanity. So the Serbian government, in what's now called the Republic of Serbia, was being punished, and the Montenegrins distanced themselves at that point and said, we would have another vote. We would have another vote. And in 2006, they had another vote to say, we are going to declare independence, and we've never been fully absorbed by any of these entities. They never were fully absorbed by the Ottomans. They were never fully absorbed by the Venetians, by the way. While Venice had a big super city state, part of this area was part of Venetian territory, but they were never fully absorbed by the Venetians. The Ottomans, not fully absorbed by the Austro-Hungarians, and never fully absorbed by any Kingdom of Serbia or Kingdom of Yugoslavia. So when the time came, just short of a decade ago, they said, no, we're independent enough. We've always had this semi-autonomous state, and so we want to vote to go ahead and distance ourselves from Serbia. And it was a 55% to 45% vote for full-on independence, which means it wasn't an overwhelming vote, but it was a majority. And at that time, and this gets back to what I've taught you, that states never, ever, ever willingly give up territory. That's true. I stand by that, because Serbia had been bombed for years by the US and NATO. Kosovo, which is a territory just over that way, was actually not really possessed, but there were UN and NATO peacekeepers there. Serbia had been bombed into submission. They had already lost Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina. And so whenever this negotiation occurred for Montenegro, the people leading Serbia at the time were more sensible than the bloodthirsty bastards that were in charge before. A guy named Slobodan Milosevic, who died while on trial for crimes against humanity. He was the leader of Serbia when lots of bad things happened. So they had more sensible leadership in place in the Serbian government in 2006. So when this vote happened and this negotiation happened, the Serbian government said, well, okay, so Montenegro declares independence, and we're going to accept that because what choice do we have? They've already lost significant amounts of territory in what was the former Yugoslavia, which again disintegrated in 1991, 1992, all the way through the late 90s. And this was more of a peaceful departure. Montenegro was the last chunk of territory to declare independence and get fully recognized sovereign state independence from what was former Yugoslavia, even though it was part of what became the state of Serbia. And the story isn't over yet. It is for Montenegro. They declared independence in 2006. Everybody recognized it. The world recognized it. The Serbian government recognized it. Passed through the UN with flying colors. This is one of the newest sovereign states on planet Earth. Happy end of the story for Montenegro, which, by the way, is a super awesome country that's on the upper level of medium to upper medium income level. Pretty decent GNP per capita. This is a pretty wealthy state once it departed itself from the rest of Yugoslavia. But the story's not over for Serbia. That is because the states that are called Kosovo and Vojvodina, which are semi-autonomous areas of what's still left of Serbia, may or may not be also trying to declare independence. Kosovo actually did declare independence right after Montenegro did, but it hasn't been accepted by the world at large and not by the Serbian government. So Montenegro, is that enough facts for Montenegro? Did I forget anything about this awesome place? This is absolutely, this is on the spur of the moment. Was not going to do a podcast from here, but we're looking at the scene. We're like, people need to see this place. You need to party here. You need to come here. The people are awesome. The climate's awesome. It's a great place. So greetings, and hope you learned something about one of the world's newest states, Montenegro, and party on.